Welcome to Brandstorm, the podcast that talks to the people behind America's brands. I'm Dan Trzynski, president of Platypus Advertising and Design.
And I'm Nancy Christopher, PR director at Platypus. Do you have a brand that could use some spectacular aerial footage? Well, what do you need to know about drone photography? Our guest today is going to tell us. Frank Datzer is a director of photography and a licensed drone pilot for DCP Video. Thanks for joining us, Frank.
Hey, Frank.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, let's see. We could probably do a whole show just on that, but I'll try to condense that down.
Half-hour show, Frank.
I've been doing this for 35 years. So, yeah, in the beginning, I went to UWM. I studied film and mass communications. Yes, exactly. And then out of college, I started a production company with a partner of mine, and we did everything from commercials to promotional videos, training, etc. But the majority of my career I was the assistant vice president of U.S. Bank's media department.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And I did that for a good 16 years, kind of built their division there and ran that for quite a while, and then left there and went to GE Medical and ran their department for a couple of years. And then the last part of that, I owned and operated a DVD authoring and duplication company for about 7 years. So I finally was kind of missing shooting, and there was a little bit too much paperwork going on, and I decided I would become an independent contractor. And right now I work for a variety of clients, producers, ad agencies, and companies as a videographer and director of photography. And I've shot 2 feature-length independent films also, which
Wow.
were distributed, and they're available on Amazon Prime if you guys need something to fall asleep to.
Okay.
So,
what are the names?
one of them is called Mr. Scrooge to See You, and the other one is called The Return. They're both on Amazon Prime right now.
How did you get into drone photography?
Well, in being a videographer or director of photography, once in a while you're getting people calling and saying, well, we're doing this, we're doing all of this, and we want to shoot this or a promo or a commercial, whatever. And can we get an aerial shot of that? Or there's another way to do it. I mean, you can go out and get a drone pilot or someone to come in and do it for you. But for a while, I got into drones fairly early before all the licensing and all that came about. And I got pretty good at flying a drone, and there are some amazing shots you can get with it. I finally decided when they came out and said, now, in order to be commercial, in other words, anything that you're making money off of, you need to be licensed. And
what goes into that? More
than you would imagine. And it was more than I imagined, because when I went to take my license, I thought, well, I've been flying drones for a couple of years. I can tell you just about anything, how to fly this thing and how to get a good shot, and didn't do enough research until I went in and took my test and failed it by about 10 points.
Wow.
And realized that they don't really care if you know how to fly a drone. They want to know if you know weather, and if you know how fog is formed, and if you know how clouds are formed, and if you know how airport traffic is handled, and if you can read a TAC chart. It's basically a junior pilot's license is what you're going to get.
Wow.
Or a junior meteorologist, too.
Yeah, I went through junior pilot, so I was going to say, it sounds just like that.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. So I went and studied those things. And
Did
there's
you take
quite
a class
number
for it?
Well, there's a number of people online that once they figured out that people need to know these things, that they got together and put together kind of nice, concise background pieces and things that will give you kind of the background you need to get in and get this thing done. And it is much more complex than I ever imagined. So after studying for a couple of weeks, I went in and ended up taking again, and I ended up getting an 85. You needed at least a 70. So the complexity of it is there's 600 questions on the test. Now you don't have to know those. There is only 60 questions that come out of that 600, but it's different every time. So you can go in and take the test and think, well, now I'll study all of those 60 that I got. But when you go back in, it's a whole new 60. So it's a difficult test. And you pay $150 every time you take it. And you also have to go through a background check in order to make sure you're qualified to be doing this.
And is that standardized from state to state, or does it change for every state?
It is. No, it's an FAA, so it's a Federal Aviation Association test. So it is the same in every state.
And what about internationally?
Internationally is a whole different animal.
Okay.
Canada especially, because I have been up in Canada, and I did take my drone, and after talking to a few of my peers, I decided not to shoot up there. They are much, much more restrictive than the U.S. And you are supposed to be licensed in Canada in order to fly a drone up there. So
God, you think they got nothing but
shouldn't be.
airspace up there?
Boy, you'd think, right? And I've heard horror stories from some of my friends also who have gone to places like Thailand, where they go into Thailand and they bring their drone thinking they're going to shoot. And when they get to the airport and through customs, and they actually confiscate their drone.
Saying, what are you
And
going to
they
do with that
say,
thing? Right.
yeah, they say, we'll hold it. And you know what? When you leave, you can come back through the airport and we'll give it back to you, but you're not going to fly it here. So there's some pretty hefty restrictions out there. And, with good reason. I mean, there are a lot of people out there that don't realize that these things really are not a toy. I mean, they can hurt people, they can bring down an airplane. And people do it as a hobby, which is great, but there's still rules even for the hobbyists that they shouldn't be flying these things in certain areas. And
You don't have to have a license to just do this as a hobby, correct? If you just want
not
to
for
buy
a
a drone.
hobby.
Okay.
No, not for a hobby. But I think what people don't realize is that any monetization of this, anytime you're going to make money off of this, you do have to have a commercial license. And from the standpoint of, somebody's has a factory or a company, and they say, what we'll do is let's just take our drone. My son has a drone. We'll take it up. We'll take some shots, and
Let's
then we'll
call
put it
Cal.
on our website. Yeah.
You can't do that.
You put it on the website, and that's basically a commercial use, right? And even people that shoot as a hobby and then throw stuff up on, say, YouTube or something, and then
Start getting paid, right?
let them put ads up. That's a commercial use. And the FAA is not an enormous division. I mean, there's not a lot of people there, and they don't have their own police force or anything else.
They have their
But
hands full
there
with
are,
Boeing right now. So
yeah, exactly. But they do, they do. I do know stories of people that have gotten, cease and desist, and people have gotten warnings, and there's a couple of cases that made the news where they've gone after people, and I think the first offense for some of these things, like flying over people and some things you shouldn't do, is $10,000. So it's not a minimal cost.
Yeah, that's substantial. So
right.
if I'm a company and I have a brand and I want aerial photography, what do I need to know about pictures?
How do you vet who's doing it?
Yeah.
And to know that they're
what do we have
licensed?
to what do we have to consider? What do we have to know? Yeah.
When you get a license, you get a card from the FAA. So there is an actual physical license. It's not, not just, I'm licensed pilot. I would say ask for credentials. Let me see your drone license. It's about the size of a driver's license. It's got your name on it. It's got everything on it, showing that you're a commercially licensed drone pilot. I think that is the number one thing. I've talked to multiple people that have called me before and said, hey, we're doing this video, but I think we're going to have, my friend Charlie's whatever son is going to shoot some aerials for us. But can you do the good stuff? Do the interviews, do all of that. And I'm like, well, does he have a drone license? And oh, well, no, we're just going to take a couple shots. And I try to educate him. I don't want to sound like I'm pushing it, like, well, you shouldn't use them because I should do it. But the truth of the matter is, I'm saving their butts there because they can get in big trouble not using a commercial pilot.
What about required permissions or permits or things like that? I mean, if you're shooting in a populated area or in a city, I know we did a shot. It was still photography downtown for a client, and we hired a commercial pilot. But do you do the permitting? Is that up to the brand or the agency to do that? Or how does that work?
Yeah, and where do you go to get permission?
Right.
Yeah.
How do you know if you need it?
Right. Most of the time, it's about doing research, right? Every location is a little different. About 6 months ago, I had a shoot for a big aging community, like
senior living.
Senior living. Yeah. And they wanted an aerial shot. We want to show, the span of this and what it is and how big this place is. And it was right next to Timmerman Field, which is, a smaller airport. And I called up Timmerman and I said, hey, can I get ATC, air traffic control support on this and whatever? And they said, well, we don't really have a manned tower at that time, so we really couldn't give you permission for the time that we were shooting. And at the time, you had to call like 2.5, 3 weeks in advance in order to get it. It was, I think, you get called a week before to shoot it. You don't have enough time to get the permission, right? So we ended up, believe it or not, getting a helicopter and bringing a helicopter in from Chicago to have to shoot that, just because I had the drone and ready to go, but we just couldn't get permission to do it.
Yeah, and I imagine even that time frame seems weird because it's like, okay, well, is it going to be a sunny day? Is it going to be windy? Is it going to be snowing?
Exactly.
Is it going to be, how are you going to know 2.5 weeks ahead of time whether that's even a good day to shoot?
You're exactly right, Dan, and that's the problem. Some of that is changing. I haven't been really keeping up to date. I don't use it that often. I think the problem is it's kind of one of those things that became kind of a fad. Everybody wanted a drone shot when people started doing this,
Sure.
and now people are getting a little smarter and a little bit saying, a drone shot would be a great thing for this, or yeah, we don't really need a drone shot. I think what people ignore from the standpoint of drone footage is everybody thinks of that same shot, right? You go up a couple 100 feet, you get a nice
Right.
spin around the building and show it. But I think what people don't realize, or a lot of videographers don't realize, or director of photography, is low level drone shots can be just as
Dramatic.
fantastic. I
Right.
mean, yes, exactly. You go up, 20, 25 feet and you fly close to a doorway or even inside now because the drones now, a lot of them don't need GPS. The one I have right now doesn't use GPS all the time. It doesn't need to have it. So it'll fly with sensors and you get in a warehouse, where you can go up a long aisle of an enormous warehouse.
Sure.
And it is a beautiful shot that you could have never gotten before without getting a crane in there or something
Right.
like that.
Right.
And some of that low level stuff is just beautiful. So that's where I like to use it more now than the big beauty shots.
So we talked about you had to have a license. You
Mhm.
had to get permission. Is there anything else you need to know?
Well, I mean, there's basic rules, and these even land for the hobbyist, right? And that is, you can't fly above 400 feet. 400 feet is kind of like the ceiling for drone.
Oh,
So you have to stay at 400 feet or below. You also have to keep your drone in line of sight. And it's a little scary. If you go on YouTube, you can search for drone, and there's these people on there that say, hey, I tested my drone and I flew it out 2.5 miles before I lost the signal. And you're looking at it going, guys, what are you doing? I mean, so these are the people that are going to cause the rules
Sure.
to
Sure.
change, right? Because they're careless, right? And then the other one, of course, never fly around airports
Right.
or near airports. And if you do fly near airports, there is a way, a phone number and things you can call, and you can almost get immediate permission now if you have all the information. You need to know your longitude and latitude of where you're going to be flying. You need to know the time of day you're flying. You need to know how long you'll be flying and things like that. And usually you can get permission to do that. But you have to understand, remember I told you earlier, I didn't realize when I took the test all those things you need to know. But that's where that comes in. If you know airport traffic, if you're going to be downwind of where the airplanes are taking off, you have to be very careful, and they will probably not give you permission if you're in that downwind or in that takeoff area. If you're in the backside of it, you can probably get permission. There's a lot of technical things that go into getting it near airports. And then, there's rules that some people don't follow either. And one of them is it's illegal to fly over people. You cannot fly over groups of people. And you see a lot of this too, like at stadiums and things that people will be flying over people. And that's illegal.
yeah. If you want to get a picture like at a festival or something,
Exactly.
you
And
can't do that, huh?
no, if that drone falls out of the sky from 100 feet up, besides the fact that you've
It's
got
going to leave a
usually
mark.
yeah 4 or 6 blades spinning around, that'll take your finger off. I can't imagine when it lands in people, right? And you can't fly over stadiums or at sporting events. You have to stay away from that,
Right.
or near any kind of emergency response teams, like if there's fires or things like that. And now, the emergency response teams use drones a lot for looking at things and kind of scoping things out. But if you're out there saying, well, I'm going to get some great shots of this big, forest fire or whatever,
Yeah.
you have to be really careful. And then there's the, normal rules, just like being in a boat or driving a car. You can't fly under the influence of drugs or anything like that. So, and I guess the last thing is, and the one thing that I see people break every once in a while, is night flying. You're allowed to fly 1 hour before sunrise and 1 hour after sunset.
Wow.
And that's it. Besides that, you shouldn't be flying at night without special permission.
So, with all of those things to consider, how far in advance should you plan an aerial shoot like that?
In a perfect world, of course, it would be give me 2 weeks at least, right? And that doesn't always happen. It just doesn't always happen. And I think what clients need to realize is that if you call me a week before, two or 3 days before, there's a real possibility we're not going to be able to shoot
It's
that
already
shot
booked
then.
too.
Yeah. Well, besides that, but it may be one of those things that they say, well, we want to open this thing with a beautiful shot of our building or whatever. Well, okay, we'll get that, but it may not happen that day. It may happen later on. We'll book that, 2 weeks out. Or I think, Dan, you had said earlier, and I think that makes a lot of sense, is, you have to really watch the weather too,
Sure.
right? Because you can't really fly in the rain, and there's days that when the wind is so strong that you just don't want to take it up. You're not going to get a good shot, number one. And number two, you may end up crashing the drone just because of the wind problems.
So one of the things I always say is just because I own a chisel doesn't make me a sculptor.
Exactly.
So why use a professional to do this versus doing it yourself? Can you talk to about the types of equipment, the stabilizing, the types of cameras that you use? Because I can buy a drone for $50 and stick a GoPro on it and try to do this, but I've seen some
Sure.
of those things too. So
Yeah, and I think from the standpoint of quality, and I got to tell you, I mean, drones have come a long way, and even some of the cheaper drones have some pretty nice quality. But that said, what you're really after is experience, right? People that know what they're doing with the drone will get you a better shot, and they'll get you a shot that's legal, and they'll get you an option to take that shot and do something a little different with it, to maybe grade it so it looks a little nicer, or that it matches the other shots that you're putting the program, into a program.
sure.
Things like that. I mean, I've seen some hobbyists that are wonderful at flying drones, but they're not photographers, right?
Right.
So they don't know. When you're up there, there's a better angle to do this and tilt it down and get some composition that looks a little
Lighting,
better and
right.
things like
Yeah.
that. Exactly. Because truth of the matter is, I used to use a Phantom 4, which is, and I'm sure you've seen these. They're, DJI has pretty much cornered the market on drones, or at least professional drones. And that is, it's a big white drone. And when I used to travel with it, it went in a big Pelican case. And now I travel with something called a Mavic Air, which is a tiny drone. It's, I can fit it in one hand.
Wow.
And the thing takes 4K video, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's just shoots some beautiful stuff. But you have to set it up correctly, and you set up the camera correctly. And a lot of times, I'll shoot in a log version, which is basically kind of a something that you can bring back to your studio, and you can grade the color on it and things to make it look very cinematic. So there's a lot of things to consider there, and not to say that somebody can't do it, but I think from the standpoint of safety and what you're getting on the end product and experience, it makes a big difference. I've seen too many people that have gone out, even in the videographer world, and say, hey, my PR department's kid, he can come in and he'll shoot our video for us and do this. And then, about 3 weeks later, usually they come back to you and go, yeah, that didn't work out
Didn't
so
work
good.
out so good. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what kind of costs are involved in this? Is it expensive to do aerial photography?
Well, I'll tell you, it kind of depends on
Compared to a
Depends on the
helicopter? No.
videographer. Yeah, compared to a helicopter, exactly right. And those guys got to be hurting. I got to tell you, because
Right.
we used to do a lot of that. And truth of the matter is, I talked to you earlier about that. And when we did that helicopter shoot, I expected it to be about twice as much as what it was. And so I think they're trying to compete with the drone people out there themselves and lower it down, but that can't be good for them. The cost really is, to me, it's a value add in my business, not something I only do. I'm not just a drone photographer, and I don't go out there and market myself as a drone photographer. I go out and talk to a client and sit down, and we go through it, and it's one of the tools in my toolkit, right? So if we're going through this and I say, I think what would be really great is we used a drone in here and, send it through the warehouse, or did a little spin around in that area you wanted to talk about. And then it becomes an add-on to me. So from my standpoint, it's not overly expensive. There's usually an added cost that I throw in there to say, okay, we're using the camera lighting kit, this, and I'm going to put the drone in for this much, right? So it's
Okay.
another camera I would be using as an add-on to add to your story and to enhance it.
Well, that's very nice of you.
Yeah, being an old audio guy, I haven't done enough drone photography or video to even know the answer to this question myself. So, can you get audio in the same thing, or is that going to then be a separate thing that you sync later?
Yeah, you sync it later. You can usually,
Okay,
on most of them, you can actually switch it over so that your phone or your iPad, whatever you're using as your monitor, to be able to see the shot, where you can actually pick up the audio through that unit. So in
Okay.
other words, I could have the drone up 100 feet flying around, and I can say, if you can see right now, the drone is over your building and blah, blah, blah. And you can hear me on the video
right.
doing that it's recording. But
No, but I'm talking about if you're miking talent and you're like shooting them with a
Oh.
drone and that kind of stuff.
some of the drones are more noisy than the others, and you get it up about 100 feet. You really aren't hearing anything, but at that
Right.
point,
But
you
if
hardly
you
can
could
see their
mic it on
faces
like
or their lips,
a
right?
Zoom recording unit or something like that, and just
Oh yeah,
then just
sure,
sync it.
for sure, exactly. I did a piece for GE a few years ago where one of their guys standing in front of their sign I had the drone right about at eye level, like you would have a normal camera on a tripod. And then he said something, blah, blah, blah. And he said, and here we are at GE. And of course, then we pulled the drone way back to show the
Sure.
building or whatever. And we completely redubbed that.
Sure.
It was just easier because with the drone that close to him, there's no way.
It's gonna make it,
100 buzzing bees around him, right?
Yep. So, okay, totally off the business topic.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody wants to become a drone hobbyist, what should be the first thing that they buy? Because I know if I would do one, I would crash it and I'd waste a bunch of money. So what would be the best entry level thing to get yourself into this?
Well, I don't get a kickback from DJI or anything.
Okay.
But DJI did just lately come out with something called the Mavic Mini. And I think the drone is like $300 and some dollars, just over $300. And it is a great little drone. It's getting reviews. Everybody loves this thing. And that is one of the things I love. But it's like easy to fly and easy to learn. So it's a great learning drone from that standpoint.
Okay. Well, if I crashed something that's $300, I would be mad at myself. So
yes.
I remember you're talking about one without even a camera. Just to learn the principles of how to fly one of these things. What would you get?
Well, maybe there's drone school. Can you go to a drone school?
Well, yeah, they have them that kind of travel around. I don't know of anyone that is kind of like there's one over 6 miles away. It's a drone school that runs constantly, but they do have kind of drone seminars and things that break out and come around. But the best way to do it really is to get your hands on one and go to a park or go somewhere where there's no trees and nothing you can hit
and
get
low.
used to it. Yes, exactly. That's how I started. I went out, I started flying it around and got the feel for it. And then I started trying to do figure eights and do all of those things because there is some hand-eye coordination between the, getting the elevation and getting the yaw and and how you move it and things. So it really is a matter of,
that's why I'm thinking more of the $50 one. Is that the thing to start learn with?
Well, if you don't have
hand-eye
coordination, don't even try.
Yeah, then you're off.
What are you saying, Nancy?
Just saying. You're that worried about it, Dan. Maybe you don't have the dexterity to do it.
I don't want to crash something that was $300.
Think of it this way, Dan. If you go out and buy a decent drone or one that's a little up in the market of $700 to $2,200. So,
right.
the $300 drone sounds pretty good. Right?
Sounds better now. Yeah. But
yes.
But
I wouldn't even try it.
Thank God.
I think the problem, Dan, is if you go to your local Target and you end up buying a drone, you're going to buy a drone that, number one, not going to handle well and not.
Okay,
so
I'm not going to get
connection.
the same experience.
Yeah. So, I would say right now that Mavic Mini, which is about the cheapest one in the market, that still has got some professional quality to it.
Okay.
Would be the best way to go. If you're serious enough about it.
No, I think I'm going to call you and hire you.
Yeah, I think that's the best idea.
I'm not going to.
And what is the best way to connect with you, Frank?
And is there a place we can see some of your stuff? Do you have anything online that?
Yeah, I've got some Vimeo. I don't have the Vimeo accounts right in front of me here, but I do have some.
We can put it in our show notes.
Okay, because I do have an aerial reel that I use in that. But if you want to get a hold of me, you can email me, and my email is Frank, Frank, at dcpvideo.com. You can look me up on LinkedIn under Frank Datzer, or I do also have an Instagram account where you'll see some stuff, and that's DCP_video.
Okay.
That's great.
Thank you so much for sharing all your drone knowledge. So one of my big takeaways
is don't drink and drone.
Right.
Very good. That's a good one.
Is that a
bumper
sticker?
I think that's a good one.
And if you really need a good shot, call Frank.
Just get somebody who's licensed. You know, I mean, it's just not worth the risk from a safety standpoint and also from the standpoint.
The liability, your brand liability. Yeah. It's the last thing you want to do is crash this thing into the schoolyard.
Or you're just fine because you don't have a license.
You call Nancy for PR help after that.
It always will come back to the client no matter what. So you may end up with that, but they may go back and say, well, you hired an unlicensed drone pilot.
Right. Well, thank you again, Frank. It was nice having you on board. All right.
Thanks, guys.
And to our listeners, if you have any questions for Dan and me about today's episode, please feel free to contact us on our LinkedIn pages. And if you like what you've heard today, don't forget to share, review, and subscribe to Brandstorm.
This is Dan Trzynski, along with Nancy Christopher at Platypus Advertising and Design, an awesome company that creates perceptions that influence choice. We hope you'll join us next week for another episode of Brandstorm.